My family had a word for my grandmother. They used it at dinner tables and birthday parties. And holiday gatherings when they thought she couldn't hear. Sometimes when they knew she could. The word was, embarrassing. She wore the same coat for 11 years. She drove a car that was older than most of my cousins. She lived in a small house on a quiet street. And grew her own vegetables. And repaired things instead of replacing them. They laughed at her grocery coupons. They rolled their eyes at her simple cooking. They told their friends her house smelled like the past. My grandmother heard all of it. She never said a word. She just smiled her quiet smile. And kept her secrets. My name is Grace. And the day my grandmother's lawyer read her will out loud was the day my family finally understood exactly who they had been laughing at. Welcome to Silent Karma. This is a channel for stories about people who were underestimated. People who were written off, overlooked, dismissed. People who stayed quiet while others talked. Who lived their values while others performed theirs. And who, in the end, left behind something that no one saw coming. Tonight's story is about my grandmother, Eleanor. A woman who served as a nurse in the army. Who raised 4 children mostly alone. Who lived simply, gave generously. And was mocked for both. It is also about me, Grace. The granddaughter who loved her. When it wasn't easy and wasn't popular. Find a comfortable position. This story takes its time. And the ending is worth every minute. My grandmother Eleanor was born in 1941. She grew up poor, genuinely poor. In a small town where nobody had very much. And everyone pretended not to notice. She put herself through nursing school. Working 2 jobs and sleeping 4 hours a night. She graduated top of her class. 3 months later she enlisted. She served for 6 years. She never talked about it much. Only once, when I was about 12. Did she show me a photograph of herself in uniform? She was 22 years old. Standing very straight. Looking directly at the camera. Not smiling, but not hard either. Just present. Completely present. I asked her if she was scared over there. She thought about it for a moment. Then she said, I was scared of coming home. And being small again. I didn't fully understand that then. I understand it now. When she came back she married my grandfather. Had 4 children and built a life. That looked modest from the outside. And was anything but. She worked as a nurse for 30 more years. She saved. She invested quietly. She never told anyone what she had. Not even her own children. Especially not her own children. My grandmother had 4 children. My mother was the youngest. The other 3, my aunts and uncle, had long ago decided that Eleanor was a source of obligation. Rather than a source of love. They visited on holidays when it was expected. They called on birthdays when they remembered. They sat at her table and ate her food. And then drove home and complained about the drive. My Aunt Helen was the loudest. She had married well, at least she believed she had. And she wore that belief the way some people wear perfume. Heavily. At all times. She talked about her kitchen renovation at every family gathering. She talked about her children's private school tuition. She talked about the vacation house they were considering. She talked about my grandmother's house the way people talk about a car that should have been traded in years ago. Mother, honestly, you could sell this place. And live somewhere with actual amenities. She said this at least once a year. My grandmother would nod pleasantly. And offer her more tea. My Uncle Robert was quieter but no kinder. He had borrowed money from Eleanor twice. And repaid it once. He treated the unpaid loan as a gift she had chosen to give. He had not asked her permission to reframe it that way. My Aunt Patrice mostly just ignored Eleanor. Which was, in some ways, the cruelest of all. To be invisible to your own child. To be in the same room and simply not register. My mother was different. I don't say that to make her a saint, she wasn't. She had her own struggles, her own blind spots. But she loved Eleanor quietly and consistently. In a way the others never did. She called her every Sunday. Not because it was scheduled. Because she wanted to. She brought her groceries when Eleanor's hip was bad. She sat with her during doctor's appointments. And took notes on a small yellow notepad. And asked the questions Eleanor forgot to ask. And she brought me. From the time I was very small. My mother brought me to Eleanor's house. And left us alone together. I think she understood something. That most people in the family missed. That Eleanor was extraordinary. Not despite her simplicity. Because of it. I spent weekends at her house throughout my childhood. We cooked together. We gardened together. She taught me how to sew a button. And how to read a financial statement. And how to tell the difference between someone who is wealthy and someone who is rich. Wealthy people, she told me once, know what their money is doing at all times. Rich people just know they have a lot of it. I was 9 years old. I wrote it down in a notebook I still have. She talked to me like I was a person worth talking to. Not a child to be managed. Not a small version of something that would matter later. A person. Right now. Worth her full attention. I loved her the way you love someone. When you understand, even young, that what you have with them is rare.
Grace grew up watching her family perform love, while Eleanor lived it. There's a difference between visiting someone on holidays and actually showing up for them. Eleanor noticed. She always noticed. She just never said anything. Until the very end.
The mockery wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was a look. A pause before answering a question she had asked. A glance exchanged between cousins at Christmas. When Eleanor brought her contribution. Always something homemade. Always something careful and considered. And someone made a small sound. That wasn't quite a laugh but wasn't quite nothing either. My Aunt Helen once brought a guest to a family dinner. A colleague from her husband's firm. During the meal the guest complimented a photograph on the wall. An old black and white portrait of Eleanor in her 20s. Helen laughed. That's my mother, she said. Before she decided to give up on everything. Eleanor was sitting 3 feet away. She heard every word. I was sitting next to her. I watched her face very carefully. She did not flinch. She did not react. She picked up her fork and took a small bite of her food. And turned to me and asked quietly if I wanted seconds. I said yes. She served me herself. Later that night, when everyone had left, I helped her wash the dishes. We worked in silence for a while. Then she said, without looking up, some people need to believe that those who have less deserve less. It makes them feel safer. Don't become one of those people, Grace. I told her I wouldn't. She handed me a dish to dry. I know, she said. That's why I'm telling you. Eleanor was diagnosed with a heart condition. The winter I turned 28. It wasn't immediately life-threatening. But it was serious. It required management. Regular appointments. Medication adjustments. Someone who paid attention. My mother and I became that someone. We divided the appointments between us. I took the early ones, the ones before work. I sat in waiting rooms with bad lighting. And read the same magazines 3 times. And learned more about cardiac health than I had ever expected to know. The rest of the family had opinions. My Aunt Helen called my mother to say that perhaps it was time to consider a facility of some kind. Somewhere Eleanor could be properly cared for. Somewhere, I noticed, that was not anyone's home. My Uncle Robert called to ask whether Eleanor had updated her will recently. He framed it as concern. I was in the room when my mother took the call. I watched her face as she listened. She said, "I'll let her know you called." She hung up. She was very still for a moment. Then she said, "He doesn't want to know how she is. He wants to know if there's a timeline." I said nothing. Neither did my mother. Some things don't require a response. They just require that you see them clearly. Eleanor stayed in her house. We made sure of it. She tended her garden through the following spring. She cooked Sunday meals. She read every evening by the window in her armchair. She lived the life she had chosen. On her own terms. Until she couldn't anymore. In her last year, Eleanor and I fell into a rhythm. I came every Saturday morning. I brought groceries and she made coffee. And we sat at the kitchen table for hours. We talked about everything. Her life before I was born. My life, my work, the relationship I was in. That I wasn't sure about. She listened without interrupting. She asked good questions. She never told me what to do. She just helped me think. Once, about 8 months before she died, she asked me to sit with her in the living room instead of the kitchen. She said she wanted to show me something. She opened a drawer in the side table and took out a small leather folder. Inside was a document, several pages, typed, official-looking. She placed it on the table between us. "I want you to know this exists," she said. "I want you to know that I thought carefully about it. I want you to know that I am at peace with it." I looked at the document. I didn't read it. I didn't ask to. I just looked at her. She was watching me with that expression. She sometimes had, calm, clear, certain. Like someone who has made all their decisions. And is simply waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. "Whatever you've decided," I said. "I trust you." She put the folder back in the drawer. "I know," she said. "That's partly why." We finished our coffee. We talked about her garden. We never mentioned the folder again.
Eleanor didn't need to explain herself to Grace. She didn't need to justify her choices. Or seek permission or ask for understanding. She just needed someone to trust. And Grace had spent a lifetime earning that. Some inheritances are built over decades. One Saturday morning at a time.
Eleanor died on a Tuesday in November. It was early morning. Still dark outside. My mother called me at 5:47. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. I drove to the house. I sat in Eleanor's kitchen for a long time. The coffee maker was still set for 6 a.m. The way she always had it. I let it run. The family was notified. My Aunt Helen arrived that afternoon. And walked through the house with a particular kind of energy. That I recognized immediately. She wasn't grieving. She was assessing. She opened cabinet doors. She looked at the furniture. She stood in the middle of the living room. And said to no one in particular, "Well, we'll need to deal with all of this." My Uncle Robert arrived an hour later. He asked about the lawyer within 20 minutes. He didn't ask how my mother was doing. He didn't ask how I was doing. He asked about the lawyer. I watched all of this and said nothing. I thought about Eleanor washing dishes. I thought about what she had said. Some people need to believe that those who have less deserve less. I thought, she knew exactly who they were. She had known for a very long time. And she had prepared accordingly. The reading of the will was scheduled for 3 weeks after Eleanor's funeral. The family gathered at the lawyer's office. A conference room with a long table and too many chairs. The night before, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed thinking about Eleanor. About the leather folder in the drawer. About the way she had looked at me when she said, "I want you to know I am at peace with it. I didn't know what was in the will. I want to be clear about that. I had never asked. I had never looked. Whatever Eleanor had decided, I had meant what I said to her. I trusted her." The morning of the reading, my Aunt Helen called to ask if I was coming. She seemed surprised that I was. There was something in her voice. A slight edge, a small condescension. That told me she considered this a family matter. And wasn't entirely sure I qualified. I was Eleanor's granddaughter. I had spent every Saturday of the last year of her life sitting at her kitchen table. I qualified. I got dressed. I drove to the lawyer's office. I sat down at the long table. And folded my hands. And waited. The lawyer's name was Mr. Hartwell. He was in his 60s. Quiet, precise, unhurried. He had worked with Eleanor for over 20 years. He began with the standard language. The formalities. The dates. The legal framework. My Aunt Helen shifted in her seat. My Uncle Robert checked his phone. My Aunt Patrice looked at the ceiling. Then Mr. Hartwell paused. He looked around the table. He said, "Before I continue, I want to note that Mrs. Eleanor was an exceptionally deliberate client. She updated this document 4 times over 20 years. Each update was considered carefully. Each change was intentional." He looked down at the document. He began to read. To my daughter Helen. Eleanor had left a single item. Her mother's china set. 11 pieces. Noted as being of sentimental value only. Helen's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. A small tightening around the eyes. She said nothing. To my son Robert. A letter. Sealed. Personal. And a sum equivalent to the loan he had not repaid. Subtracted from his share. Which left him with nothing. Robert's jaw tightened. He put his phone face down on the table. To my daughter Patrice. A box of photographs. And a note that read, according to Mr. Hartwell, "I hope these remind you that I existed." The room was very quiet.
Eleanor didn't use her will to punish. She used it to be honest. Every item she left was a mirror. She showed each of her children exactly what they had given her. And then she turned to the one person who had given her something different.
Mr. Hartwell continued. To my daughter Margaret, my mother. I leave the house on Elm Street. Fully paid, no encumbrances. Along with its contents. And my thanks for every Sunday phone call. My mother made a small sound. She put her hand over her mouth. I reached over and held her other hand. Mr. Hartwell paused again. He turned a page. He looked directly at me. And to my granddaughter Grace. He read. I leave the remainder of my estate, including all investment accounts, holdings, and assets, with the instruction that she use it in whatever way honors the life she is building. He set the document down. He said, without expression, the total value of the remainder is approximately $12,400,000. The room did not erupt. It went silent in a way that was almost physical. The kind of silence that has weight, that you can feel pressing against your ears. I did not move. I did not speak. I held my mother's hand and looked at the table. And breathed very carefully. $12,400,000. From the woman with the 11-year-old coat. From the woman whose house smelled like the past. From the woman they called embarrassing. Helen was the first to speak. She said, there must be a mistake. Mr. Hartwell said, there is no mistake. She said, Grace is a grandchild. We are her children. Surely she intended, surely the primary heirs. Mr. Hartwell said. Mrs. Eleanor was entirely clear about her intentions. As I mentioned, this document was reviewed and updated multiple times over 2 decades. The most recent version was signed 14 months ago. There is no ambiguity. Robert said. She wasn't well. Toward the end she wasn't thinking clearly. Mr. Hartwell looked at him steadily. He said, I met with Mrs. Eleanor 6 times over the course of drafting this final version of the document. She was accompanied by her physician at 2 of those meetings, who provided written confirmation of her cognitive capacity. She was, if I may say, one of the most clear-minded clients I have worked with in 30 years. Robert said nothing else. Patrice had not spoken at all. She was looking at the box of photographs that had been placed in front of her. Her expression was something I had not seen on her face before. Something that might have been shame. Helen gathered her things. She stood up. She looked at me across the table. She said, You manipulated her. I looked back at her. I said, I showed up every Saturday. That's all I did. She left without responding. My mother and I sat in the parking lot for a long time. After everyone else had gone. She cried. Not dramatically. Just quietly. The way people cry when something has been held in for a very long time and is finally allowed to release. I didn't cry. I felt something I don't have a perfect word for. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't satisfaction exactly. It was something closer to recognition. Eleanor had seen something in me when I was 9 years old and writing in a notebook. She had invested in that something for over 2 decades. Not with money. With time. With attention. With her actual self. The money was the last part of that investment. And it was almost secondary to everything that had come before. Almost. My mother said, Did you know? I said, I knew the folder existed. I never read it. She nodded slowly. She said, She knew you wouldn't. That was the point. We drove home separately. I cooked dinner that evening for the first time in weeks. Something simple. Something Eleanor had taught me. I ate alone at my kitchen table. And felt, strangely and completely, like she was still present. Not gone. Just finished. Helen retained a lawyer. She contested the will. The contest lasted 4 months. It failed completely. Mr. Hartwell had prepared for this. Eleanor had prepared for this. The physician's statements. The signed documentation at every stage. The clear and consistent paper trail of a woman who knew exactly what she was doing and made sure no one could claim otherwise. During the contest period, Helen called me several times. The calls shifted in tone over the months. First anger. Then appeal. Then something close to pleading. In one call she said, You know she loved us too. You know this isn't right. I said, I know she loved you. I don't think that's what the will was about. She said, Then what was it about? I said, I think it was about what she valued. And what she hoped to see more of in the world. She hung up. She didn't call again. Robert never contested. He read the sealed letter. I don't know what it said. He has not spoken to me since. Patrice called me once, briefly. She said, I should have visited more. She said nothing else. I said, yes. We said goodbye. That was the most honest conversation I had ever had with her.
Eleanor spent her whole life being underestimated, being overlooked, being called embarrassing. She could have spent that energy being bitter, being loud about what she deserved, being resentful. Instead, she invested it in the one person who showed up, in the one person who listened, in the one person who never needed her to be anything other than exactly what she was. Quiet people are not small people. They are just patient.
People ask me sometimes what I did with the money. The honest answer is, I tried to do what Eleanor would have done. I kept the house on Elm Street. My mother lives there now. She tends the garden. She keeps the coffee maker set for 6 a.m. Some mornings I drive over early. And we sit in Eleanor's kitchen. And drink coffee and don't say much. It's enough. I established a small scholarship in Eleanor's name. At the nursing school she attended. For students who work 2 jobs and sleep 4 hours a night. The ones who want it badly enough to earn it the hard way. I invested the rest. Carefully. Deliberately. I know what my money is doing at all times. I still have the notebook from when I was 9. The one where I wrote down what Eleanor told me. It's on my desk. I open it sometimes when I have a decision to make. Not for answers. Just for her voice. It's still there. Clear and steady and certain. Like she always was. My grandmother Eleanor was not a wealthy woman. In the way her family understood wealth. She did not have a vacation house. She did not renovate her kitchen. She did not perform her success for anyone. She was wealthy in the way that actually matters. She knew what she valued. She lived by it without apology. And she left behind something real. Not just money. But a way of moving through the world. That I carry with me every single day. She wore the same coat for 11 years. She grew her own vegetables. She drove an old car and repaired things. Instead of replacing them. And she was the most powerful person I have ever known. If these stories help you rest. If they remind you that the quietest people are sometimes the most deliberate. That patience is a form of power. And that how you treat people. When there's nothing in it for you. Is the truest measure of who you are. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. A new story arrives every day. This is Silent Karma. Good night.